You're welcome. We booked this as a drop-in, so it is meant to be casual. It is meant to be booked over the lunch hour. So if you're having lunch, feel free to keep your camera off and muted and enjoy your possibly messy lunch without any fear of anyone seeing you wear your your soup or whatever it is you're eating. So it's very casual, but you're welcome at any time to come off mute or turn your camera on, and you can ask any questions at any time. So without further delay, let's get right into it. Hopefully this works. Okay, so I've already touched on some of this. Ask questions at any time. Maybe there's one thing you're here for. So if you get that one answer and you don't need anything else, you're free to leave. You don't have to be here at the start and be here at the finish. Just come and go as you please. And I mentioned the webcam already. So Beth, what was it, 3 years ago, I think? 3 or 4 years ago, we created, through a very large national campaign and initiative, we created, I think, an industry best competency set for the HR profession. You're welcome to pinch these for your organization as you're creating new HR positions. I think this is top-notch level work, but for the purposes of this, the validation of experience, we are largely focused on the 9 HR specific competencies. I won't go through them. You're welcome to read them on your own and check them out on the website, but it's sort of what drives everything. Okay, this is sort of the DNA to not just the designation, but more specifically, I mean, it's everything, but more specifically today, it's what's driving the validation of experience. So the experience that you have, it has to fit nice and tidy into one of these categories. So basket weaving, which is always the example that everybody uses, that's as valuable as that experience might be. It's one that you would probably struggle to fit into one of these 9 HR specific competencies. Therefore, it wouldn't be included. The other significant change that we made was we shifted away from some old language into this new, and there's no point talking about the old language, but this is sort of the new language we're using, and it has been a dream. We've gone through this validation of experience once. Beth, if you can keep an eye on folks coming and going, that'd be great. We've had one round with this new language, and it has been exponentially easier on applicants and our committee members for sure. The language is just much more user-friendly. It's more regular, everyday language that we would use. So advisory and administrative is what we're looking for. So when you submit your experience, HR-specific competency, check. What level is it at? That's the next check mark we're looking for. So is it at the advisory level or the administrative level? And we do consider both of those as qualifying, and I'll get into how that works in a minute. But for the purposes of just this slide, I'm just going to define high level. Advisory is people are coming to you asking for advice, right? Very straightforward. Advisory advice. It's so straightforward. I probably don't even need to do this, but I will. So as an example, advisory versus administrative, a great example would be, let's say you've got a health and safety component to your position, and unfortunately there's been a workplace injury, and there's a manager who comes to your office and says, "Hey, Nick, unfortunately there's been another accident. This is like the 3rd time this week in the same location. What's going on? Can you help me figure it out?" Boom, you're going into advisory mode, right? You're getting pulled in. They're looking for your expertise. You are the subject matter expert, and they want your advice. The alternative, so that's advisory. The alternative is there's been a 3rd workplace injury again this week, and someone knocks on your door, and all they want you to do is just log it into a spreadsheet. Can you capture that? We got to track all these injuries. So someone eventually, maybe not you, but someone eventually would be advising them on how to prevent these injuries. But if your job is just to record it, then you're operating at that administrative level, and you haven't risen up to that advisory level piece yet. So that's probably the easiest explanation, just playing out that scenario. We do have more examples of that later on and on our website, which I'll get into. The next piece, just going into, I don't think this is necessary. I won't get into it too much because I think advisory is just so straightforward now. But just for extra information and clarity, to help determine if it's advisory level, you can look at the independence of your actions. So if there's a heavy amount of micromanaging involved, then you may not be at that level. So if you have some self-direction, some autonomy, then you're more likely at the advisory level. The depth, how deep do you go? Are you just skimming the surface? Are you digging deep and you're analyzing? So that spreadsheet is a perfect example. If you're just entering it in, you're just skimming. You're just putting the data in. But if you are truly going in an advisor, you are analyzing that data. That person comes to you and says, I don't know, let me add to the spreadsheet and see what's going on. Hey, it's the same employee every single time. Maybe it's just that one employee missed the training day, or several employees, maybe they're bypassing some safety controls. So the depth is important to consider. And the responsibility, how accountable are you? Are you able to give advice and it's never going to come back at you? If you gave wrong advice, then probably you're not at that advisory level, right? Very straightforward, I think. But there's no such thing as a stupid question. So please, by all means, ask any questions you want. And with that in mind, maybe I'll just freeze for a second. Well, more than a second. I'll freeze for a moment and see if there are any questions. Looking good. Okay. I will carry on. So these are more examples of breaking down administrative versus advisory. So in recruitment, for instance, posting jobs, attending career fairs, you're not really advising. You're doing some administrative level work. Advisory is when you start to create workforce plans, you're implementing policies, you're doing some talent mapping. Just a couple more examples. Skip health and safety. You have a labor relations. So if you're just tracking grievances, you've got a spreadsheet and you need to update it, or you just have to have a basic understanding of the collective agreement, that's administrative. But if you're interpreting that collective agreement, right, so you have to do some application skills, or you're leading discussions in grievance meetings, that's most definitely advisory. I don't know if anyone on this call, it's very rare that we have folks that pursue the designation that fall into any of these categories. Union rep happens once in a while. So union rep is on the union side, and it's not a true HR position. I won't get into it unless there's someone on the call that wants to explore it with me. Supervisory is the one that does happen from time to time. So this is how the conversation usually goes. Someone will call us and say, I do HR stuff. That's unfortunately, that's usually the red flag for me. Not always, but usually that's the red flag when they're not using terms like talent management or labor relations. They're like, I do HR stuff. And then I ask them, why do you do HR stuff? And their answer, whatever it is, what I end up hearing is because I have people leadership responsibilities. So I'm hiring people, I'm firing people, I'm managing their performance. I'm doing it because these are my direct reports. That's not advisory. You're doing it because you are a leader. So we do differentiate, and that does confuse a lot of people and sometimes upsets them. But I thought I was HR, and I'll rebuttal with I have financial responsibilities. I have to maintain a budget and P&L and all that fun stuff. But I don't consider myself an accountant because I do finance stuff. So that usually resonates with them, and it gets them to come around. And clerical work is just it's clerical work, so that's not advisory at all. So I think we have a good understanding, I hope, of advisory versus administrative. So we sort of have we have many pathways. Most of them involve an option of having a degree or a non-degree, and that will dictate how much of those advisory level years you have. So often what we see actually is that we don't typically see a lot of administrative experience submitted, but you are allowed. So bottom line is you need 3 years of experience with a degree in your back pocket, 8 years without a degree. And in both cases, your role, if you're in a traditional HR role, great. If you're in a non-traditional HR role, then you need at least 51% of your role is HR. So I used to hold a position that was called Corporate Services Director. I had facilities reporting to me, IT, HR, a whole bunch of corporate services. And I was able to pursue it because HR was my biggest chunk. So it has to be 51% or more. So within the 3, as you can see on the slide, we need at least 2 years of advisory. The whole thing could be advisory, but at least 2 years, and then you can include a maximum of 1 year administrative. On the non-degree, same thing applies, but the numbers are 5 and 3. So a minimum of 5, a maximum of 3. And again, I don't know if I'm going too fast, so I will slow down. I'm really excited. This is this is what we do. This is something we know inside out, and so I'll just purposely slow down. I see a hand up, 2 hands up, which is great. I think I saw Amanda's first, so you're welcome to type in your question, or you can come off mute.
I'm okay to come off mute. Hi, thanks.
Awesome.
Not to bore everybody on the call with my credentials, but I'm just curious. I do have a post-secondary degree with an HR management certificate from
Yeah.
St. Mary's University, but I've been practicing in HR, mostly in the advisory and consultative space for longer than maybe it makes me sound old, but like let's say 15 plus years. In that case, would you recommend that I go the non-degree route because my experience is so, vast, and that I don't bother with going back because I graduated from university a long time ago, that I
Yeah.
don't bother with going back and getting, all the details from the university that I would need to go that route?
Sorry, I think I missed the degree. How does the degree piece play in? Can you refresh me on that part?
Yeah, so I have a BA in psychology with an HR management certificate
Yeah.
from St. Mary's University that I got in 2007. And I've been in HR since
Yeah.
2004, in either talent acquisition, but
Yeah.
more recently in the last 10 years in like consultant roles in various organizations. So,
I got it. Okay.
to go back
Yeah.
to SMU where I graduated so long ago, does that even make sense? Or should I just use my experience to my advantage?
Yeah, I mean, it's totally up to you. I mean, it sounds like you would be successful in both pathways. I mean, if it were, I mean, it's user's discretion, I guess. If it were me, I personally would probably just ask for my transcript, and so I can submit less. I just have to submit 3. But I mean, if you have 8 years in your back pocket, no problem. And I mean, you could go that route.
Yeah. Okay. I just
It's
wanted
up
to
to
know if there
you,
was like
but
okay. Just that was
yeah.
more what I was curious about is there like a recommended approach in those instances?
No, I think they both apply. I just call me crazy. I just, for my own confidence and sense of security, I would probably go with the 3-year route because it's easier to achieve and satisfy the committee's requirements. But
Okay.
but it's up to you. Yeah,
Got it.
both are fine.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Like all we need is just confirmation of the degree, right? We're not
Yeah.
scrutinizing or checking out, the dates of it or anything. It's a tick box. She's got a degree. We only need 3 years.
Got it. Okay. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
That's helpful.
Thank you. Yep. Great. Charmaine?
Hi. And I might be getting ahead of your presentation, I'm not sure, but I just had a question in terms of how to demonstrate 2 years or 3 years of the experience itself. Is that done through providing your resume, or if I'm providing like just one example of a scenario where I've had to provide the advisory services, how are you determining that I do have the actual 3 years of the advisory HR experience?
Yeah, without getting into too much detail, the beginning of the application, it's a bit of a resume drop. You sort of dropping, I've had this role for this many years, and before that, I had this role for this many years. And then later on, towards the end of the application, we ask for examples of advisory level. And when you put, the first job, then, and that maybe covers 2 years, you've been in that role for 2 years, and the committee will go, oh, okay, well, there's 2 years. Oh, Charmaine used the second job, and that was for 8 years. So, one can assume that she's got 10 years of experience. So we don't ask specifically like, when did that example happen? It could have been last month. But the assumption is that you've been operating at that level for the duration of that position.
Thank you.
Awesome. And I see, is there a chat? Oh, so Camilo is asking in the chat, it's okay if a certificate from the company to demonstrate an international experience. So great question. So I think I'm going to handle that with 2 different ways. So number one, I think a question that we get sometimes is does it have to be Canadian experience? And it doesn't. It has to be HR experience somewhere on planet Earth. We don't care if which country it's coming from. And then as far as valid, we don't need a certificate, but the application does require a supervisor to sign off on it. So someone is through their signature confirming that what you're saying is true.
And just to add to that, the international experience is treated the exact same way as the Canadian experience. And actually only one company needs to sign off on your experience on the application.
Yes, perfect. And as Beth just spoke, I just now realized I'm so excited to talk about this topic that I skipped who we are. You should probably know who we are. So lovely Beth, as you can see with a great smile. She is our manager of member relations for CPHR Nova Scotia, and we do support PI in Newfoundland. And I am the CEO of CPHR Nova Scotia. Beth is our long tenured employee of what, 5 years now? More than 5.5-ish. And I've been around for 4.5. So she's been keeping me honest and teaching me everything I know. All right. Oh, I see another chat question. So a question about the organizational chart. Do you just require our specific team or the entire HR team? That's a great question. We definitely don't need the full organizational, your whole organization. I think it would probably be a good idea to do the entire HR team. It really depends. I'd say that just to cover your basis, because you might be in a scenario where you're in a position or a department that is not familiar to the committee members. So I'm just going to make up an example. You might be in the human capital department and no one's ever heard of that department and they don't understand how does that fit in. Is it even HR? So if it's straightforward, if it's like a recruitment department, that might be sufficient, but cover your basis, I'd say the whole team. Should the examples, next question from Whitney, should the examples provided on the VOE only be advisory, or administrative examples are acceptable as well? So it depends what you're doing. So if you have, let's say you're going the degree route, you need the 3 years, and you have 3 years of advisory, just submit the 3 years of advisory. There's no requirement to do the admin. The admin piece is just to not make it unnecessarily long and burdensome for applicants. So if you spend 1 year in a junior role and then 2 years in a heightened role, then yeah, definitely. If you're using the admin role to get to your 3 years, then you have to use an example from that. I think that's a good distinction I should make. You only have 3 years. 2 of them are advisory, 1 of them's administrative. We need an example in your 8 examples of administrative, if that's clear, I hope. So Amanda, so for example, if your current employer signs off on your current role, you can also list other roles you have had that are relevant but not require signature. Exactly, you got it. I'm going to give you a thumbs up because you're listening. Awesome. Okay, 2 thumbs up. Was that you, Beth?
No.
Do you need a job description for every role on the resume? Beth, over to you.
No, you just need to send one, and it's usually the current. As well as same with the org chart as well.
Awesome. Let's I think that was a good round of questions. We're gonna keep moving because I suspect we're gonna trigger more. So let's go back to the PowerPoint. Before I dive into this, is anyone on the call in a non-traditional HR role? You can just give a thumbs up or a hand or a comment. Otherwise, I will just bypass this slide. I'll give you about 5 seconds. No pressure. Anyone having a good lunch? Okay, I'm going to keep going. Actually, I'm not going to keep going. I'm going to pass the baton. Beth, you want to take over?
Sure. So this is the process. So renewal period just ended, so ensure your membership's in good standing. If you're following the degree pathway, we need to receive your official transcript. If you don't know if we've received it or not, just send us a quick email. We'll double check that for you. If it doesn't get to our office by the time, like the deadline, that's totally fine. We will not review your application. And then we started touching on with your VOE application, the completed application filled out with your 8 examples, signed off by an employer, a job description, org chart, and then a current resume. And then there's also a $175 application fee. And there's a question from, yeah, there's a hand raised.
Yeah, thank you. I'm having trouble getting a transcript from one specific university. I don't know if it was you that emailed me this morning or someone did and said I can't access it. I have a master's degree that's after my undergraduate, and so that one's put in, and my HR diploma is put in as well. If for some reason, I mean, my undergrad should come through, but if it didn't, is that a huge issue, or would the other two be considered?
Well, we only need one. We only need one transcript to confirm a minimum of a bachelor's degree. So
yeah, so I would say that master's more than satisfies that degree requirement.
Yeah.
I just don't want to hound them too much if it's not required, but I'll just make sure that the master's one is in.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay. Maybe
I'll
you
just
get bonus points for something more than a degree, Beth? No?
No.
You're mean.
And then I'll just also add that if you did the accredited program with a diploma or a graduate certificate that doesn't satisfy the degree requirement, we need to have that transcript that says you have a degree.
And Beth, Shantia?
Yes, that's...
Yeah.
Yeah, so we would have already received that for the waiver application, and then we would need something else for the degree.
Awesome. Okay. So, what's the next step in the process?
Well, if successful, you get some great news coming from Nick, and then we'll send an invoice for the completion fee and then celebrate. And then if unsuccessful, there is a process that you can follow with a reassessment being the first step. And I do see a question in the chat.
Yeah, you go ahead. Sorry.
We need all of those: the resume, job description, organizational chart, signed off by your employer.
Yeah, that's actually like the next slide.
Yeah. Don't think there's anything to add to that other than, yes, meet the deadline. The deadline's September 29th if you're doing it for the fall session. Otherwise, the next one will be in February 28th.
Are there any implications to the date on your transcript? So let's say, for example, I requested the transcript today, but things happen and I don't meet the deadline for September 29th and I want to apply in February. Do I have to resubmit for a new transcript at that time?
No.
Okay.
And
yeah,
if you submitted your transcript after you became a candidate, like 5 years ago, that's still fine.
Okay.
We just need to have received it at one point. That's the only thing we need.
Thank you. Sometimes the universities can be challenging, so that's helpful.
And we do accept email for those. A lot of the post-secondary institutions are emailing it now, and we do accept that. And there is a question in the chat, Nick. You might be able to answer that one.
Yeah, so Camila asked, in what case would an application be considered as unsuccessful? It's a great question. I would say the number one reason would be that they didn't, when they were assessed, they didn't meet the years requirements. So they didn't have the 3 years of, I'm just going to stick to the degree pathway because it's probably the majority of you. But in the degree pathway, for instance, they submitted 3 years of experience and not enough of it was considered advisory. So it fell short. So of the 3 years, you need a minimum of 2. And maybe what was assessed was of the 2 roles you submitted, only 1 was advisory and you'd only been in it for 1 year. So that's usually the case. It falls short on the amount of advisory years. Sarah, does that, Beth, I don't know if you want to add anything. That's the only scenario I can really think of.
It could be maybe the competencies, but that hasn't been an issue with the recent
True.
changes.
Yeah, that's a valid point. You know, or your role was not seen as 51% or more HR. I mean, that happens occasionally too. That's like the supervisory example. So someone that says, I do HR stuff, I'm managing people. And that might be another reason that they'd be unsuccessful. They would see it as not enough HR within the role.
And one thing to add too is co-op experience and volunteer doesn't qualify. It needs to be paid employment. So if someone had banked on that being some time towards their VOE and it doesn't qualify, then they would be unsuccessful. But you're welcome to apply for the next one is the other thing. It's never, the door's not fully shut. You just reapply next time.
And you'll find that, like, don't overthink your application too. I mean, you want to do your best job and put your best foot forward. But if there's a misstep, it's not beyond us to reach out and ask for clarification or ask for more. So if you miss something, you forgot to dot an I or cross a T, we will reach out and say, hey, can you cross that T? Can you dot that I? Can you clarify that position? Because, of course, we want to get you through. This isn't a process of, we're not offering a designation on application skills, right? We're doing a designation on HR professionals. So if you failed, to do a good job at the application, despite you are an HR professional, we want to overcome that with you. So we'll work with you. Sarah asked a good question for the employer verification. If I had two managers at the same time, does each manager need to complete the verification? Over to you, Beth.
I would say no. We only need one signature, right?
Yeah, I agree. Okay. Who's doing this slide? Is it
That's
me?
you. It's back to you.
That's what I thought. Okay. So although it's recommended, it's not required, but this can be a tool that will help you keep your examples clear and not lengthy. We have volunteers that go through these, and sometimes these applications can be quite lengthy. And just to help make it a tackleable size for our committee members, our volunteers, this is a tool that can help you stay focused, but also make sure that you tick the right boxes, right? You don't want to just start rambling a story and it's incomplete and they're not sure what actually happened. The STAR methodology is one that will keep you focused. So I can go through an example of this. You're all HR professionals, so many of you have probably seen this before. This is a good tool for performance appraisals and other types of feedback. So S is situation, so you want to describe the situation. T is task, what actually happened. And then the action is what did you do about it? And then the R results, what happened? Did anything change? So I think we're going to do an example together. And hopefully, I'm going to try and just type right here. Bear with me as my computer wakes up. Why am I blind? Here we go, text box. Okay, I'm going to create a text box and hopefully it's white. No, it's black. Just change the font color so you can see it better. Okay, so STAR. And I'm just going to demonstrate how, we get applications where the examples are like half a page long. I'm going to give you I'm cheating because I am going to give you a very straightforward example, but I think it gives you a good idea of how clean and tight it can be and how simple. So let's say the situation was we did an engagement survey. You get to see my typing skills now. And I'm just going to keep it short. And result was feedback on DEI. The task was, so, you know, as an HR person, I did this engagement survey. I saw that there was some shortcomings in the DEI side. And in particular, what I found was that we needed to shift to gender neutral washrooms. Let's say that's the situation. So, you know, identified need to change.
It's always worse when people are watching you, Nick. Don't feel bad. That's what I'll do it.
I'm trying. Gender neutral, etc. You get the point. So the action was I had to do a presentation and convince managers to invest in said washrooms. The result, I was successful. We invested, we did it, and employees equals happy face. Okay, I'm exaggerating a little bit. Don't do that. But employees were, I don't know, the next engagement survey was positive. But like that's literally, what is that? I mean, I really took some shortcuts in that, but that's probably at most 6 sentences. Now, the trick, though, what you'll see is that I didn't use any acronyms or company jargon. Like, you have to put yourself in the shoes of the reviewers. They don't know your organization. They don't know what the JAMIN committee is. What's the JAMIN committee? I don't know. You know, they don't know what, yeah. Anyways, I think you get my point. And Charmaine's got her hand up, and she probably has a great question that'll stop me from rambling. So over to you, Charmaine.
Hopefully, it's a great question. So if the application indicates that you have to demonstrate your level of autonomy and your level of responsibility in making the decisions or making the advice or recommendations or whatever it is,
yeah.
How would we, is the work description and the resume used to kind of determine that in conjunction with this? Because I'm just thinking about my application that I'm working on, and I probably got 8 examples in one if based on this amount of text, right? So I just want to make sure that the amount of text that I'm providing isn't overwhelming the volunteers reviewing this, but also capturing what it is that I need to show I do.
Yeah. The short answer is yes. So to play that out, so I used to be on the committee before as a staff member, and what I find myself doing, and I know many other reviewers do, is you kind of ebb and flow. You read an example and you're like, wait a minute, what does Charmaine do again? What's her title? And you go over to the resume and you're like, oh, that's her title. Oh yeah, that makes sense. Wait a minute, where does she fit in the organizational structure? And then you jump to the structure. Think, oh, okay, I see where she fits in now. I'm going to go back to that example. Oh yeah, that all makes sense. Like it just, you kind of ebb and flow. Like you read it once and then you get the example. And then if there's something not clear, you kind of jump back and the reviewers will put all the pieces together to get a wholesome picture of what Charmaine is doing. And if that is truly advisory level.
And one quick follow-up, if you don't mind, in terms of the number that you assign to the example, because in my mind, there's some overlap in some of the things. If it's diversity, that could be talent, recruitment and development or whatever.
Absolutely.
How much of a stickler point is that going to be if somebody's reviewing that? And let's say if I assign it to workforce planning and development when it's actually D&I or something.
I mean, we definitely take the designation very seriously, but I would say I am allergic to the words of like stickler. So I do my best when I train the reviewers to not be sticklers. Like there used to be this mindset when I was on the committee, we felt like we were almost like police. We were like these. If you can picture this image of like police guards in front of a gate, and we were protecting people from getting through that gate. There's cheaters and liars and stealers out there. We're gonna bust them. None of you on this call are cheaters, liars, and stealers. You're all submitting your legitimate examples, and so we're not looking for the gotcha, and back to the line, or you have to do 2 more years. So there is a lot of like, we give the benefit of the doubt, and if it's not clear, then we reach out. Like we want to help you get through it, So there's no stickler action happening.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure I wasn't, submitting it and being unsuccessful because it wasn't put in the right.
Yeah, no, and I completely agree. It is sometimes a bit of a coin flip. Is it competency 1.3? Is it 1.4? And by all means, it's a Word document application. If you really want, you can put both. There and one thing, I haven't got into this yet. I think it's later on in the slide. There is no specific number of competencies required anymore. Okay, it's subtle. The application would lead you to believe, and it's not intentional, it's accidental, and that we don't know how to curb it other than me just verbally saying it like this. When we ask for 8 examples, everyone logically goes to this place of, I have to give 8 competencies. So each one, I'm going to dabble into something else. That's not the case. And it's not like keep this a secret, we're trying to make sure. No, all 8 examples could technically be from the same competency. So if you talk to people that have had the designation for 20 years, they will tell you that someone that goes 2 inches wide in HR and 8 miles deep, like a headhunter, a recruiter, 20 years ago, they couldn't get the designation. There was this breadth that was required. That has changed. We now see that a hardcore recruiter or a hardcore health and safety person, and that's all they do, they can be considered an HR professional. As long as they can link it to the competencies and they have 8 examples and they have 3 years of experience, they can do it. Oh, I read your mind. Hey, Charmaine?
There's some other questions in the chat too, Nick.
Oh, okay.
So would you say supervisory roles shouldn't bother to submit the application?
Well, I mean, you could be a supervisor and submit, but you shouldn't be submitting if all of your HR experience is because you're responsible for these people. So you can be an HR manager and you have 2 HR generalists reporting to you. The key is that other people are relying on you for HR advice, not yourself relying on yourself, right? So like the finance example is a great example where, I have some financial obligations, but no one's looking to me for financial advice, right? I have to maintain my budget. I have to prepare balance sheets and statements, and I have to, go through an audit process. But no one's reaching out to me saying, "Hey, Nick, what should I do for my audit? What should I do for my balance sheet?" So it depends who you're doing it for. If you're doing it for yourself, then you probably shouldn't be submitting. There's a good chance you're not going to satisfy our requirements. But if others are asking you for advice, then you should. I hope that's clear. It's a little tricky. Probably a private conversation. If you want to, if it's tricky or it's gray, you're welcome to reach out to me and we can pick up the phone and figure it out together. Was there more questions, Beth?
Yeah. Does the org chart need to be an official on that it's externally facing?
Over to you, Beth. You got this one.
Might need your help on this one. I think just need to see an org chart, and if there isn't one, we're fine if you create one just to show us where you are in your organization.
Yeah. Just keep in mind, so formal is great, informal is okay too. Just keep in mind that your boss will be signing off on it, right? So if you put this on the back of a napkin and you're making things up, then your boss is going to say, "What the heck is this?" But if your organization doesn't have one and you go into a Word document and you create one, you include it in the package and your boss sees it and says, "Yep, you captured it perfectly. That's it." I'm going to take down my share.